Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast, brought to you by the combination of the Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. I am Aaron St. Denis. You can find me on Twitter at FFMadScientist. I've got Evan with me. You can find him. He is at SoCal Ball Nerd. How's it going, Evan?
Hey, it's all good, man. Just in the middle of working a long shift, but ready to get a little break and get into some football, man, at the end of February. Nothing better than that.
Completely off track. Are you a Game of Thrones fan? Because you look like one of the characters. The big red,
you know what?
Beard.
I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones at all. Not a single portion. Barely. I mean, even like a clip of it. I wouldn't know a dang thing you were talking about.
So it's a pretty, well, it's not an obscure character, but if you've never seen it, you wouldn't have any clue what my reference is. So I'll just move on. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's good, man. But I can imagine from the little bit I do know about it, looking like that kind of character. So, but it's all good, man. Having a good day. Happy to be on. Thanks for having me, man.
You totally look like you're streaming from a doctor's office. Not gonna lie, I know you said you're not, but you're at work. But you look like you're in a doctor's office right now.
It's got the calendar. It's the second room of the office at work, which has like a deposit bag. Like it looks like a medical bag. Probably it's like
collected stool samples on my podcast. Some would say that's what I've done all along. It's just one big stool sample. So, all right. Before we get too deep into it, you want to tell everyone where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, so again, I'm Evan at SoCal Ball Nerd is the handle right there on Twitter. You can find me on X pretty much all the time, dropping posts. Co-founder of the sports affiliation with at IDP Iggy and JC Money, which you know, sportsaffiliation.com, the sports affiliation YouTube, at the sports affiliate on Twitter. Find my work there, articles on the website. Consistently, dropping plays, dropping thoughts all day through the timeline. That's pretty much what I got going on, man. You can just find me on Twitter.
Awesome. I guess we can get into it. We've got another edition of 2024 Dynasty Risers and Fallers. We will start with your riser. That is New York Giants wide receiver Wan'dale Robinson. He's going into his third year. He has finished as wide receiver 115 and wide receiver 53. Last season, 60 catches on 78 targets for 525 yards and 1 touchdown. His keep trade cut value, which is, at this time of year, probably the best indication of how the general public values him. They have him 172 overall in single QB drafts, wide receiver 67, whereas Fantasy Pros expert consensus has him as 162, wide receiver 68 overall. So he's 10 spots higher on Fantasy Pros and basically the exact same number, difference of 1 in overall positional rank. The 10 spot different in Fantasy Pros is likely that the experts are waiting much later on quarterback and pushing them down because, like I said, it's one quarterback ranking. So wide receiver 67, 68 range. What are you thinking here for Wan'dale? He is, I'm going to look just a sec. I don't know how far down that is, which tier that is. 60. That's a way down there. He is in tier 7, which starts at 56, wide receiver 56, and goes all the way to wide receiver 74. So he looks to be in the biggest tier of wide receivers with like 20 different receivers that we largely have no clue what to do with. So what do you want to do with Wan'dale?
I'd say out of that tier, there's a little bit more to at least be excited about with Wan'dale. I mean, he could easily, kind of wind up probably back in that same tier. We don't really know. Quarterback play, is Danny Dimes going to come back and look a little bit more like his 2022 self? Are they going to be playing somebody else? But again, Wan'dale without a quarterback this season, you mentioned the numbers. I mean, 60 catches, 500 plus yards, only had 9 carries, but they tried to use him on the ground. And one thing I like about Wan'dale, man, is they look to get him the ball. And right now, there's not much of a depth chart on that team. I know we're looking at, maybe a Neighbors or somebody going there. I'm in the camp where I think drafting an alpha wide receiver like that is only going to help a guy like Wan'dale because he's already somebody, out of his 60 catches, 29 of those were for first downs. He likes that short intermediate route. He can catch the ball down the field, but they didn't have anybody to throw the ball down the field last season. So I think he'll add that second level of longer, that ADOT will increase, that yard per catch can increase, that yard per target. And they're going to look to get him the ball underneath, right? 6, 7, 8 targets in multiple games. I think towards the end of the year, you saw him be used in both those roles. And for where he's at, first off, you really can't fall much farther than that. So he kind of has to be a riser, right?
Fair enough.
But this guy coming out of college, man, he was a sleeper on a lot of people's boards, right? You listen to guys, he was somebody that we're like, man, this kid's athletic. He's got good hands. He can get the ball in space. He can catch the ball underneath. There's a lot of things to like about him. And you're kind of seeing he could be maybe that Debo factor on the ground. And we want touches in fantasy football, right? We want a guy that's going to get the catches, get some carries, because we see in a world, especially of running backs, where, dual committee guys, like getting 10 to 15 touches is a hard thing to do. Yeah. And I think that wan'dale can get up to that point where he's getting 10 touches as a wide receiver. And I think we're seeing after that ACL tear in 2022, he's just 1 year removed from that. And we talk a lot when that happens to running backs that it's that second year where you really see a breakout. I don't think it's any different with him. And I think for how bad this Giants team was offensively, when you look at him having 78 targets, when you look at 60 catches, when you see him being involved, you got to like that, because that offense really can't get much worse, right? Like, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, you want a good quarterback, right? But I think, Waller should be better. I think Danny Dimes can come back. He's nothing great, but we've seen guys produce with garbage quarterbacks. It doesn't matter. Get the ball in his hands. They look to him on third down. That's big. Guys who get first downs generally seem to see an increase in points per game the following season. And so I like that stat about him, getting kind of half his catches for first downs. I think he's fun, man. He's young. He's exciting, coming off that injury. There's a lot to like. And I'm not saying that he's going to be a wide receiver 1, even wide receiver 2, but if you can go and get wan'dale for basically nothing, and you can find him in a flex spot in your lineup every week, and he can crack that top 35 wide receiver range, I don't think we're looking at, too bold of a prediction to say that he can have 75 catches for 750 yards and find the end zone 5 or 6 times. And that's going to put you probably right around wide receiver 35.
No, I need him to hit. I had my first real season of rookie scouting was that draft class where I really did it as an analyst. And I had my 7 players out of that class. Some were up like Breece Hall, and he was my furthest down, Trey McBride as well. But there were 7 players where I listed as my can't miss. And that means within, I think my term was 3 years, they would have a top 24 position or season at their position. Tight end, it would be top 12. So far, he's the only one out of the 7 who hasn't hit for me. So I have faith that he will complete a perfect draft class for me. So I'm so close. But for me, it's just, there's not really all that much competition for him in New York unless they bring someone in. And he's so hyper targeted. Like, when he can stay on the field, he was like Kadarius Toney, except I think better. When he's on the field, it's 7, 8 targets. He has 13 target games. Like, he just can't stay on the field a lot. Like, he didn't struggle with injuries as much last year. Looks like he only missed 2 or 3 games. But I really think when he's on the field and when the Giants are actually doing something, he can really produce. Like I said, he's in this huge range that goes from 56 to 74. And it's tough unless you want. The only ones in this range that you might take over him are the rookies. Like, you've got the rookies of Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell. So you've got, and Ladd McConkey. So you've got tier 2 of rookies in this group. Then you've got some guys who missed: Marvin Mims, Treylon Burks, Michael Wilson, Jonathan Mingo, Jalen Hyatt. I don't know if I'd rather have him over any of those guys. And then you have a couple of the older guys who, do they have anything left? Adam Thielen, Brandon Cooks. There's one more, Mike Williams. So it's a case of maybe you take the upside of the second tier rookies. You probably, I don't know, maybe you really believe in a Marvin Mims or a second year receiver. If you're in win now, maybe you pray there's something left in the tank here for Thielen, but wan'dale seems to have a good combination of upside here. He's still pretty young. I don't know. I think he's probably one of my favorite out of this group of 20 here. And maybe him, Shaheed, and Dontavian Wicks. But like, Bateman is 2 spots below him. I would take him over Bateman 100 times out of 100. So I don't know. What do you think? I know that was a lot to digest between the rookies, the second year bust, and then some of the older guys. But how do you factor, or how do you feel about him in that range?
I I agree with you. There are some guys to like. I mean, there were things that Mingo did that I think were exciting. There were some things that Wicks did, but there's a lot more mouths to feed over there in Green Bay. I'm not a big Christian Watson guy, but he's somebody that wasn't on the field. So if he is back on the field, it's another guy there. Marvin Mims, I want to see more out of a rookie. I like Marvin Mims. He's still on my list of guys that I think is going to be a good player out of that draft class, but he just didn't get the workload. And I love year 2 players, man. Like show me something your rookie season. I'm buying year 2 breakouts all day long. And I think that Wan'dale kind of fits that, right? Because he really didn't have a rookie season. If this was Wan'dale's rookie season, everybody, and there's already some praise, and I think people are a little higher on him than I thought they might be across the board in some areas. But if this was a rookie campaign for Wan'dale, man, he would be way up there on that, potential upside sleeper type board. But I don't want Adam Thielen, man. Wan'dale's 23 years old. He was on a horrible offense. He did stay on the field. Like, his numbers should increase. And you're looking at having a player not just for this year, but for the next few years, right? He's still going to have, 2 more years left after this on that deal. I just think the upside there short term is as good as any of those players. And if he does take that next step this year, can he take another step? Can he get up to being a guy that maybe is 90 to 100 catches? I don't know. That would obviously be a huge year this year.
There's some really interesting names, Mark, are ranked way above him. Christian Watson, who you mentioned, 30 wide receiver spots above him. Which, okay, so you're going off of one really good stretch of like 4 games. Okay, fine. Josh Downs, 25 spots ahead of him. Josh Downs didn't really do anything. He had, a couple of good games. Jahan Dotson, 22 spots ahead of him. Dotson was good as a rookie. Dotson fell off the face of the earth last year. Like, there's some really weird names here. Elijah Moore he hasn't done much more. Like, he had a decent rookie season. Quentin Johnston ranked 15 spots ahead. I would say in last season, wan'dale did more than Quentin Johnston. I get that you're going to first round rookie or first round draft pick, second year player, people are going to buy in longer, but I'd rather have wan'dale.
Yeah, but I mean, Quentin though, he showed more. I'm not giving up on him at all, but as a first round pick, we saw somebody like Zay Flowers, who I feel like the Chargers should have taken if they were going wide receiver over QJ. I was saying that on draft night. I did not like that pick. If going wide receiver, Quentin was not the guy. But he didn't show a lot other than he's got the draft capital. He was a stud in college, and we think he's supposed to be good. Yeah. But, like, on the eye test, like, I didn't see much from Quentin. I'm not saying that I'm going to trade Wan'dale. I'm going to trade Quentin away for Wan'dale. But to me, and if we shift it kind of into outside of Dynasty, a little more for, like, some redraft people, the big thing for me is where you can get Wan'dale or what it would take in Dynasty to trade to get Wan'dale. Like, you got to trade a lot more in Dynasty to get Christian Watson. And in a redraft league, you're going to take him many rounds sooner. People are going to bite on those players because they're talked about, because they're hyped up, because they had some of that glamour. I mean, Elijah Moore.
But I mean, Quentin Johnston was the interesting one for me. I was coming into that class. He was my wide receiver 2 by a mile on the board. I did a complete 180, and I know everyone says it's only 1 year, and it was, but he put up every red flag you could put up, and I'm out. Like, it wasn't that he got the chance. There were injuries. The seas parted for what should have been an easy breakout for him. And he got beat by, Josh Palmer. He got beat by Jalen Guyton. He couldn't do anything right. And I know it's only 1 year, but I was just out. I seen every red flag I could see.
And it's only 1 year. And at the end of the season, when he had some more chances, they didn't have Herbert really anymore. He was, got hurt again. So I will kind of give him that too. But still, you got to show me more. You're a first round draft pick. You should do more. It's not like a guy like Mims who didn't really get an opportunity. Like QJ, you're a first-round pick, and you were given the chance, and you did nothing with it. That's not encouraging for a first-round pick. And what's it going to take? I mean, to go get Quentin Johnston, you're going to give up some draft capital in your dynasty leagues. To go get Wan'dale Robinson and possibly slide him into that flex spot every week.
He's on waivers in a few leagues I'm in. I got him off waivers.
That's what I like. That's what I want. It's not that I'm saying I would do them 1 for 1, but it's like, how can I build my team giving up a lot less to get a guy that I think can have as equal to or even a better season. And I think Wan'dale fits that mold. I mean, if he finishes in the top 35, I know we want top 24, but let's just say for the average, he finishes top 35, that's 30 spots higher. He's going to pass at least 30 of those guys. And then other guys that are ranked, are going to drop down. Yeah, so absolutely. That value, what you can get on the upside to me is just, there's too much there, too much that he did last season not to not see him moving up that board.
All right, let's transition to your faller. We'll have to be a little quicker on him. We were running along on time. It is Seattle Seahawks running back Zach Charbonnet going into his second season. Last year, he was running back 45, 108 carries for 462 yards and a single touchdown, 33 receptions on 40 targets for 209 yards, no receiving touchdowns. Keep Trade Cut has him as RB21. Fantasy Pros only has him as RB30, and he's ranked in the 90s overall on both sites. Where do you see him for you? Let me check. I just want to see what tier he is quickly here. They have him at 30 overall. So he is the bottom of tier 4, which is very wide. It's got a lot of the older guys, but it starts at 19 with David Montgomery and goes all the way to 31 with James Conner. So there is a mix of old guys, James Conner, Nick Chubb, Eckler, Jones, Henry, Mixon, Kamara, and then you've got a few of the up-and-comers like Tyjae Spears, a younger guy like Brian Robinson and Jalen Warren. So he is basically the youngest, him and Tyjae Spears, out of this group of what is pretty much veterans who've hit the age cliff. So what do you think here about Zach Charbonnet?
I don't think I would take him over any guys that you just mentioned out of that entire group. Maybe the landing spot for Eckler might change that. We'll see what happens with Mixon. But overall, those guys, man, like those are guys that are still going to have some opportunity. They're still going to be used a lot more in their games. Where I look at Charbonnet, and it's not like Quentin Johnston, where when Charbonnet got the opportunity, you could see his yards per carry, the way he was using the passing game when he was the lone back when Kenneth Walker was out. He's got the skill set. You can see why Seattle took him with the second-round pick. But when Kenneth Walker's in the game, he's averaging 5.5 fantasy points. Like, he's not getting the work. And Kenneth Walker's only 23 years old, still has 2 years left on that deal. And when they're both active and healthy, you saw the last 3 games when Walker was back and fully healthy, the workload is all Kenneth Walker. Same target share, 7.6%, even though Charbonnet is the passing down back. And that's my issue with Charbonnet is he was the third guy after Bijan, Gibbs. Bijan and Gibbs, Charbonnet. I mean, the drop-off there is huge. And not necessarily in talent or skill, but the avenue to production. And I'm not going to play a guy that's going to give me 5.5 points. And if Walker can stay healthy as he did for the most of this season, I don't want to have a handcuff that I'm like, well, if he gets injured, cool. Because if he doesn't, I'm not playing this guy really all season long. So where I'm at in Dynasty, if I'm really, really young and I can maybe hold him, I got to hold him for 2 years, though, probably. I don't even know if I want to do that, but that might be a scenario where I do it. But what I'm trying to do with Charbonnet is I think there's still people that were high on him last year that still think Walker is an injury risk. They think Charbonnet will take the job like they did last year. That's why he was thought of so highly. You can find those people, and I think you can flip him, for a good second-round pick or maybe a second-year player that we saw more out of that is going to get to play, right? Maybe someone will give you Dontavian Wicks, something like that. Maybe if you're shallow at receiver, you try to get Wan'dale. I think there's more value in flipping him for a guy that's ready right now than holding on to him. And for what we drafted him at last year at rookie drafts and being that third running back, I don't see that avenue, right? Like, to me, he's closer to 5 points a game than he is double digits. And where does that help us?
Yeah, you're right. We'll only go a few more minutes on him. But you're right. That's exactly I guess you're absolutely right, though. In a situation where you're young and you're in an early stages of a rebuild, maybe you can hold on to him. But in a rebuild, I don't hold on any running backs. I get rid of all of them. But in a situation where I'm a contender or like even a middling team, I'm taking him there's 8 running backs here. I'm taking him over all those aging guys because even if I get one season out of Chubb, Eckler, Jones, Henry, Mixon, Kamara, Montgomery, 1, even 2 seasons out of them as a contender, I may never get that out of Charbonnet with where he is. So you're right. I'm taking him straight up. Well, I'm taking him for sure over any of those guys in a contender. And the scenarios where I think I would keep him on my roster are not that many because, like I said, I don't keep running backs when I'm in a rebuild. So I think he is a perfect player to trade right now. Even I think if you ask me straight up, I'd trade him for Tyjae Spears straight up without question.
Yeah.
I want
No
Spears.
doubt. I mean, the volume, the road for Tyjae is there. And we saw, I mean, the amount of passing work he got, the volume he's going to get on the ground. When he got the chances, the road is there for him. I'm high on Tyjae. I mean, that's what I want. Charbonnet has that draft capital, but he doesn't have the road without an injury. And that's just a lot. I don't want to bank on an injury. Yes, Charbonnet can be good if that happens, but that's if that happens. I want a guy that's already going to get that opportunity.
Alrighty, why don't you tell us one more time where we can find you in your work so you can go back to the doctor's office?
Get back to my stool sample right here. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, Aaron. Thanks for having me. I know we talked a little extra there, but always love chatting with you, man. Always a good time. Again, at SoCal Ball Nerd, you can follow me on Twitter with the Sports Affiliation, at the Sports Affili on Twitter. Check out the Sports Affiliation YouTube, thesportsaffiliation.com. Find some of my articles and work there. Right now, dropping a lot of NBA plays. That's kind of what I do. A lot of NBA and MLB in the off season, but got to stay fine-tuned with the football. I'll never miss an opportunity to talk that. But a lot of NBA stuff going on right now, a lot of MLB. And then once the draft kicks in, I'll have a lot more football content coming back up as well.
You were at the Expo last year, weren't you?
I didn't go last year, actually. I had something come up and I didn't make it, but I will be there this year.
I couldn't remember. I knew I met Iggy and a few other people, but it wasn't me. It was my intoxicated representative in my place. So I couldn't remember if we met and I just forgot or not because I had been well served all weekend.
Which I believe I saw you comment that that's your plan again. So you may not remember meeting me this year either, but, we'll meet for sure.
I booked a hotel within walking distance because that is absolutely the plan. That is my only weekend all year where I am kid-free. That is 100% the plan. I'm bringing a wheelbarrow with me for someone to carry me home in.
Yeah. Love it. I could use the exercise, man. I got you covered.
Well, there we go. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. Once again, thank you all for tuning into the Mad Science Lab podcast, brought to you by the combination of the Fantasy Football Universe and the Fantasy Football Advice Network. Check back tomorrow for the next the next two players in our 2024 Dynasty Risers and Fallers series. Thank you again to Evan for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care, everyone, and have a great night.